Hello and welcome to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. Rachael is a speaker, inspirational author, and an overcomer. As Rachael is walking through her own journey of grief, she's challenging others to persevere and overcome their own circumstances. Find out more at rachelflick.com. Here now is your host, Rachael Flick.
Hi friend, thanks for joining me again on this week's episode of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. I'm so glad that you're here. I know that I keep saying it and reiterating it, but I'm so glad that you're here. And I really hope that all of the work that we do here on the Hopecast is an inspiration and an illumination in your life, and that it's touching you in meaningful and healing ways. I get to share part 2 today of my story with Terese Luikens. Terese experienced her father's death by suicide at the age of 13, and she is sharing a message of hope and healing for people who have experienced a similar loss. Terese Luikens contributes articles for Mother Earth News, The Secret Place, Decision Magazine, The Upper Room, Hearts at Home, and the Epoch Times, and publishes her own blog, Why Bother? A school teacher and a yoga instructor, Terese lives in Sandpoint, Idaho, with her husband and enjoys being mother to 3 grown sons and grandmother to her much-loved grandchildren. Terese, welcome back to the Hopecast.
Thank you, Rachael.
We were having such a wonderful interview last week, and I love that we get to continue it. And you were so open and vulnerable about what that family culture looked like, and how there was just that covering of secrecy, that there wasn't even honesty about the way that your father died, and how that kind of colored your grief process, and I'm sure extended and complicated your grief because there wasn't space to experience it. And so you had mentioned then coming to a place in your 20s of your own sense of hopelessness and despair, and experiencing Jesus encountering you in a really meaningful way. And then that became a catalyst for hope and healing for you. So that's kind of where we're picking up in your story. So what were some of the things that you did that were helpful in your grief?
I just want to back up for a second and talk about those words that you used about how the secrecy can extend the grief and make it all the more complicated. It does, unless people are talking about their grief along the way. There's really no healing, and I'm not sure what that does except to bring it out in the open. And bringing it out in the open helps to analyze it a little bit more, understand it a little bit more. One of the things that I did is I began journaling. I started journaling just right after we got married. And at first I didn't journal very honestly, and then I started to journal real honestly about the relationships in my family and how I struggled with a lot of anger. And I wasn't sure where the anger was coming from or why I was having so much of it, but it came out in a lot of different ways towards my husband, toward my children when things weren't going right. And so journaling was one of the things that helped bring out what for me was more anger than shame in my situation with my father's death. I know some of my siblings have dealt more with shame than anger, but I settled on being really mad. So journaling about it, and then realizing that anger turned inward, as I had been doing, is a lot of depression. And
Right.
so I didn't go to a counselor as much as I just journaled, and as much as possible, I found someone that I could actually talk with about it. We had a gentleman in our church who did a wonderful thing for one of my sisters, my brother and I, because we all live in the same area. And he knew all 3 of us. And he was the one who finally said to me, and this solidified something that I hadn't thought about, but it wasn't my fault. And that was something that no one had ever told me, that it wasn't my fault. And hearing that truth opened another door toward healing.
Yeah, there's so much richness in what you said. And I think it's interesting how the child mind is always seeking survival and aligning with your parents, even if it's dysfunctional and abusive. Because if you can take responsibility for what is happening in your family, whether that's divorce or abuse or, a death, then you somehow still have control in your environment, which can be protective for you as a child, right? Because we're fighting for this sense of safety and security. And so I just even recently heard one of my kiddos say that they carried for a while that they thought maybe they jinxed it in the way that they prayed over their dad's being shot. And then I thought, what an amazing tool of the enemy to catch a young child in a very illogical place. But it is so common for kids to take responsibility and feel guilty for things that they had absolutely no responsibility for, and kind of bringing that forward into your consciousness. I love what you said too about bringing words to your grief, because we know that when we can name and label our feelings, we actually have a chemical transition in the brain in the way that we experience our memories. And so when you're like, well, I just journaled really vulnerably, like that is a powerful tool in healing.
It is. And it's interesting that one of your children was thinking that they jinxed their father with a prayer. It's interesting how as human beings, we want to know why. Why does something happen? And if I can find the source of the why, such as, I didn't say my prayers correctly and that's why he died. If we can find the source of why, then we can bring a reason to it. But you can't really reason for the things that happen. They happen, and then we get to respond to those things that happen. And I think about how you've responded to your husband's death by doing this podcast and by giving hope to other women. That's your response to your husband's death. And my response to my dad's death, even though it took a really long time, was to write a book. And so we find these things that we can do in response to something that has happened. And somehow or another, God brings it around to working it out for his good and our good and his glory.
I know it's amazing to see the silver linings and the treasures that are found in darkness if we surrender our story to him. I love what you mentioned in the last episode, talking about this kind of group chat call that you have with your siblings.
Yes.
And I want to talk more about that. And also I'm curious because a lot of times, you're talking about this culture of shame and silence and secrecy. And so in families, we have hidden rules, right? Where it's not spoken, but it's understood. And one of those is secret keeping around trauma, right? And we don't shame the family and we don't expose these things. And so in many ways, like writing a book and having public conversations about that, if your family had a shame secrecy culture, like you're breaking all the rules. So how has that been for your family? And you are finding healing with some of them talking through what has happened in the past.
In my family, besides me, there are two other believers. And the depth of conversation that the three of us can have is a little different than having the same conversation with the other siblings who are not believers. And at the same time, we both insert inspiration and insights into each other's life. So, for example, my oldest brother, who's 10 years older than I am, when he read my book, he found it to be insightful because by the time the things that were happening to me at home, he was already gone. So he's getting insights into my life through the book and through my story, through what happened to me. And that has opened our relationship to a greater depth than it's ever been before. So my story has influenced them. And when we're having these Maycheck Maverick calls, some of us choose to share a little bit more than others. And at the same time, we're all very respectful with where each person is at in the process of healing, in the process of dealing with this suicide that happened so long ago and yet still affects each one of us to some degree.
How did you all initiate that? Was it like, hey, let's talk through our family and do group therapy on a Zoom call? Like, where did this come from?
It happened during COVID, so 4 years ago, and my middle sister, who claims to be the most creative and normal one, she came up with the idea. And at first, I deleted her emails with regards to join the call because I had phone calls with my siblings before, these group calls to try and make decisions. And when our mother was in her last years and we were trying to decide what's the best care for her, being the sixth of seven, my opinion counted nothing, didn't count
Interesting.
for anything. So I thought, I will not be heard on these Maycheck Maverick calls because I've not been heard before. But I went ahead and dialed in maybe 3 weeks into what they'd already been doing. And I found that they were good phone calls because one person came up with a question and the others had to wait their turn to answer the question. So it was done in an orderly fashion, which I was not used to in our family. Order?
There's lots of emotional intelligence in that. Order out of chaos.
Exactly right. So we started having these conversations, and everybody's questions are different. They can, my youngest brother would ask questions about, do you remember such and such a car? And I thought, that is a strange question, but that's how he thinks. He thinks in terms of cars. And my questions I would ask, because I was in the middle of writing out this book, I would ask questions about, do you remember when mom took this whole thing to court because she wanted to sue the Veterans Hospital where my father had committed suicide? And we each had a different memory concerning that. And so I used those phone calls as verifying information for myself. And then those conversations led to other conversations. So it organically grew.
That is really beautiful.
It is.
Like, what an incredible outcome after describing the way that you guys were raised and the shame, secrecy, and transforming that into, who better to understand and to process your childhood and your loss than the people who lived it with you? But most people can't do that. It's too threatening.
It is, and I'm just grateful. I just have to say I'm grateful that we can speak openly about it. Most of us can. So yeah, it's been good.
That's really
been very
cool.
good. Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so tell me about your book and just the heart in it and who's your target audience? What would you like for them to get from it?
I love that question, target audience. It is for anyone who has suffered from suicide. It could be a father, a grandfather, it could be a brother, a sister, it could be anyone. And at the same time, the person doesn't have to be directly affected by a suicide. It could be a simple loss, just the grief that we experience from loss. It could be anyone who experienced raising children and having a prodigal son. Because in that book, it was my oldest son, his rebellion that became the catalyst for me dealing with me with regards to my anger. I've had a lot of different people read it, and everybody has gotten something a little bit different from it. So I am not one of those people that says my target audience is. I'm just going to say it's a pretty good memoir.
People affected by suicide, yes.
Yes, but it's not limited to that. So
what's something that you hope that someone who reads your book will take away from it?
Hope, definitely hope. And that they will see that no matter what their story is, in the midst of that, there's God. Even when we don't recognize him, he is still there. And then when we finally do recognize him, then that's the beautiful connection. Recognizing, okay, even though this happened, and for a long time I denied that God even cared about me, that didn't eliminate God. That did not make him any smaller of a God. He is still God of this universe, and he still draws people to himself.
Yeah, that omnipotence, preeminence is powerful and must also be wrestled with, right? Because the God who has all power could have prevented
Yes.
our losses.
Yes.
And so it's like this real tug of war, and then to kind of allow that process to work its way through you until you are confident and trusting in his preeminence, right? In his writing of our stories and allowing these things to happen and using them for our good. And that is a really core piece of healing, I think, because we have to wrestle with his character.
And it is a wrestling match. It truly is a wrestling match. And I'm grateful that God doesn't dislike me just because I wrestle with him.
Mm-hmm.
He's okay with me wrestling with him. And he's okay with my questions and my disappointments. He's okay with my doubts that arise at times. We lost a child. We lost our third born child to a stillbirth. And that was
I'm so sorry.
so hard. And I remember pounding my fist and asking why. And I remember going up to the cemetery after we had put in a headstone for his name was Elliot. And I looked around the cemetery, and we had buried him in an area where infants and children were buried. And I thought, boy, there's been a lot of infants that have died, a lot of children that have died. I'm not the only one who has suffered this loss. And it just made me settle down and realize, even though I don't know why this happened, God is sovereign, and that's where I'm going to rest. He's sovereign. I am not. And that settled that. But that always comes back up. It's like, so why is this happening? Well, God is sovereign, and I'm going to rest on that. I'm going to rest on his sovereignty.
Yeah.
And I mean, our faith is tested all the time, isn't it? And it's that testing that perfects in us those things that need to be perfected.
There's a lot of perfecting to do in me personally. There's a faith and hope and count it all joy when you face trials of many kinds. I need a lot of that. I'm on the journey.
But you're on the journey.
I'm on the journey, and will be until I get to cross over and go see Jesus face to face. Joy in that journey. Man, it's hard.
Yes. It is. And as a single mom,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for validating that. It has definitely been so much to walk with my kids through their grief. And they say that kids are about 18 months behind the adults in their processing. And even this weekend, we were at the gym, and the gym was hosting a father-daughter dance. And my heart just sunk when I saw all of the cute little girls and their daddies dressed up. And I was like, oh, this is going to hit. Yes. This is going to be one of those triggers for them, and just they have different triggers than I do. And walking that out with them and really asking the Lord to be the father to my fatherless children, to show up as what he says is the defender of the widows and father of the fatherless. And it's making me teary just thinking about it, because I need him for them so intimately. But the Lord told me a long time ago, when I was praying for my daughter before Micah passed away, and I was having trouble relating to her on some developmental stage. And the Lord said to me, Rachel, just like I came to you, I will come to her. And that gave me so much comfort that he was promising to pursue her and fill in my gaps, that I have so many of. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yes.
So in your book, you talk about forgiveness and how important that was for your freedom. Talk a little bit about that.
So as I was wrestling with my anger, I had anger toward not only my dad, but my mother, and then my prodigal son. So there was this culmination of anger happening within me, and I knew that it was not a healthy thing to have. And I didn't know what to do with it. I honestly didn't. I tried, doing all of these. I'm a very active person, so I thought, well, eventually, on my jogs, it'll fall away, or my long bike rides or my long swims. This has got to just go away. But it didn't.
It feels better. Those activities help process the cortisol and the intensity, but they don't get rid of the emotional state.
Yes. Yes. They don't get rid of it. And that anger kept popping back in and popping back in no matter what. And I had begun practicing contemplative prayer, where you are silent and you're just silent. And I had gone to a monastery to practice this, and there it was easy to do because in monasteries it's very quiet. There are no distractions. And I came home to practice it. And of course, all the noises of the morning happened, and it was very hard to concentrate. But I kept it up and kept it up and kept it up. And one morning I was lying down on my back on the floor contemplating, and all of a sudden the Lord spoke to me in a way that I understood. And he said, "You just need to forgive. You need to forgive." And I thought, okay, how? How do I do this? And forgiveness is about releasing anything that you think that other person owes you. So although I had wanted something perfect from my parents, I didn't get it. Can I release that? Although I wanted my oldest son to be perfect because I'd raised him as a Christian, as a believer. He shouldn't have any troubles. I need to let that go as well. And in letting these expectations go, I was able to say, they did the best that they could, and I can accept that. They did the very best that they could, and I accept that. And I don't have to fiddle around anymore with this. And I let it go. And it was short of a miracle. It was short of a miracle. And sure, it still popped up every now and then again, but I could disconnect myself from it by saying, this isn't mine anymore. I have forgiven them, and they don't owe me anything. So just that transformation of the mind, the renewing of the mind.
I think it's important. Something, I'm in a healing journey class, which is this 29-week Bible study, and allows you to really just work through anything you want to work through. And it talks a lot about forgiveness. And I think, people will say, well, I made the choice to forgive, but I still feel anger. I still feel resentment and bitterness. And for me, one of the things was like, this is unfair, and I haven't seen justice, done on behalf of this other person that I'm angry with and feel hurt by, and rightfully so, righteous indignation. And in my class, we talk a lot about the Lord as protector, provider, power source, and that we are not those things for ourselves. And it was so powerful that I was still carrying myself as my own protector. And so I wanted justice, and I wanted defense, and I wanted them, to be punished. But if I trust that the Lord is my protector, then I can let that go. I can release that anger because he will defend me, and I don't need to see it, and I don't need to know about it, but I know that I'm safe. And so just as a combination of what you're saying with really honoring the visceral pain of bitterness and hurt, and what that takes to get that out of your body, in addition to the mind piece and renewing your mind with truth and allowing those to be in relationship with each other.
Yeah. And remembering, for me, it's remembering God is a good papa. He is a good father. And just remembering that he has my best interest in mind because he is my father. And I had enough of the father-daughter relationship to know what it felt like to have a good father. And God is even better than the good father that I had. And just remembering that, oh my goodness, God is my papa. He's a good papa. He's not going to leave me. He's got my best interest in mind. And I can rest in that. Just learning to rest in those truths. And it's a wrestling match, but eventually we do rest.
Yeah. And that's that part where we wrestle with his character.
Yes.
Is he powerful and good?
Yes.
And so once we accept him in his goodness and his love, we're able to receive love from him as our father. And that's so transformative, to be a daughter or a son who is loved, who is beloved.
Yes.
and how we radiate the light back that
Yes.
he is pouring into us.
And your children are seeing that in you,
I
Rachel.
hope
They're
so.
seeing
I
that
hope
they will
so.
remember how mother did through this time. I mean, and I'm sure you're vulnerable with them, and you're walking through the grief together, but you're doing it in such a beautiful way with them. You've got God as the guide, and you're not going to go wrong. You're not going to go
Thank
wrong.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that affirmation. We had a really sweet conversation a couple weeks ago, and it just led me to the opportunity to ask them for forgiveness for the ways that I had failed them in my grief. And it was really tender. And I pray that, those are things that, even if they might not have the, pictorial memory of that experience, that their hearts will be able to.
They will remember.
That's so kind of you. Terese, would you speak to the listener right now that is struggling with shame from a death by suicide, and just kind of speak some blessing over them as we close out this episode?
I would just speak into a person's life with regards to shame, and I would say that it is not your fault. There was really nothing you could do to dissuade the person from the decision that they made. And as hard as it is to believe that you weren't in control, you weren't. And letting yourself off the hook with regards to that responsibility would be the best thing that you could do for yourself. If you remain in your shame, you're not going to heal, and you're not going to be able to be a light for anybody else in your family that might need a light in their life.
That's so good. That's so good. I just want to follow that up with a prayer. And Lord, I just ask that you would touch the hearts of the people listening right now, and that you would come and meet them in their pain, in their valley of the shadow of death, and that you would shine on them your love and your radiance that is the counter to shame and to hiding and secrecy. And Lord, I just ask that you would bring them into your beautiful light. Father, I pray that healing would begin today, and that they would have a new vision and a new understanding of your love for them and your love for their loved one who died by suicide, and just the deep forgiveness that you have for us and for them. And I just ask that this would be an activation space, Lord, a sealing and healing moment where they are drawing a line in the sand and saying no to shame and going forward into acceptance and full love. Terese, this has been so sweet. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It was so nice to meet you and to talk to you face to face.
It was really a gift. Your story is a huge blessing, and I appreciate the vulnerability and authenticity that you bring it with. I want people to be able to connect with you more. Where can they find you?
I have a website called tereseluikens.com, and it is a lot of different stories. It's not just all based on suicide, but you can find me there, and you can read back on my blogs. I've been doing it for about 3 years.
I love that. And A Heart's Journey to Forgiveness, where can they find your book?
You can find that at redemptionpress.com or at Amazon.
Wonderful. Terese, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Rachel. Thank you so much for being here. I love it. Everybody, I hope that this episode was a blessing for you. And if you know somebody who needs to hear it, would you share it with them and continue with me on this journey as a hope peddler, pushing forward the inspiration and the healing that is so needed. And I look forward to connecting with you next week on the Hopecast with Rachael Flick.
You've been listening to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. To find out more, go to rachelflick.com. While you're there, you can book Rachael for your next speaking engagement. Her inspiring message will be sure to engage and touch the heart of your audience at your next conference, church event, or business function. Go to rachelflick.com to book her today. While you're online, you can discover more information about all of the platforms that this podcast is on. Also, be sure to click on the social media icons at the top of the page, and you will be directed to Rachael's social media sites. If you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate if you would subscribe and leave us a review. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time for another edition of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick.